And so the idea is that Jesus went and he healed by hand. Okay, well, I know how to do that. I learned how to do that. I'm pretty proficient at this point. And then he showed no fear in the side of illness and also oppression. So at that point, I'm like, well, the mask is pretty much in my mind a blatant sign of either fear from a virus or fear from people that think you should do it or fear from the government's reprisal, right?
Guys, what's happening? I am coming at you with an episode with my good dear friend, Dr. Devin Brossard. He is one who stood in the gap during the heat of COVID. He took a lot of flack from the government in Washington State. He took a stand against mask mandates. He is a brother from another mother. I highly, highly encourage you guys, give a listen to this podcast, share, and if you feel compelled to help Devin out in any way you can, please reach out to him, Devin Brossard. He is a phenomenal doc, and I'm thankful to call him a friend. Please share this episode far and wide and enjoy. God bless.
To August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be to be wearing gloves, a face shield, and mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring yourself in order.
600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?
Devin into his house. Can you get a video going? Can we see your there he is. Devin, can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear, brother.
Oh my goodness. It's good to see your face. Another brother from a different mother, Devin, Dr. Devin. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm cold, man. I'm missing the warmth of the Dominican Republic right now.
Dude, Devin, we went to school together. You graduated 2012, right?
Dude, it was like 2012, 13 years ago in 4 days, because we graduated on the 24th of February.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Yeah,
that's crazy.
It is crazy. Time goes by quick, my friend. But you've been someone that's really been in the gap. We're going to dive into that, but and that's not the point I'm trying to make here. But you've been someone that really inspired me. So I'm excited to be sitting down with you and talking to you today because you've inspired me in many ways, and you kind of blindsided me, to be honest with you. I was on my way to the office. It was a Monday morning, and then I had my inbox, and I think you sent me a few messages, and I apologize. I might have neglected a few of those, and then finally, like, dude, did you see that video? You're like stern with me, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna look at this video, and then. Yeah. I don't know what it was, but something just hit me like a freight train right in the chest. You moved to Dominican Republic on a whim.
Yep.
And bought a property there with a vision to change the world. And you're like, dude, you casted this vision onto me, brought me to tears. We went down to visit. And I have not stopped thinking about the Dominican ever since then. So thank you. And also, like, I don't know if I should thank you.
I think you have an extra kid too since that trip that you went down there, don't you?
I don't know if the timing, it might have been that. Go to Dominican, come back with an extra kid. That's what happened. Yeah. So yeah, it actually might have been around that same time.
I think it was pretty close. Yeah.
Pretty close. How funny is that? Well, that's pretty comical. Well, yeah. So yeah, man, I want to, unpack your story here because we got a lot to talk about, and we have a short window to cram in. I mean, the last 5 years and 60 minutes here. So we're gonna do the best we can. But yeah, so you bought this property in Dominican. It's such a beautiful place, Symmetry Oasis, with a big vision to change the world. And I'd love to be part of that in any way I can to help, get that vision up and running and just make it happen. But we're gonna dive in. And tell us a little bit about yourself. You got some kiddos. I met your beautiful family, and just how you got into the field of chiropractic.
Well, yeah, and absolutely. I want to just start off by saying I'm thankful that I was able to inspire you because, in one YouTube clip during what I consider to be one of the darkest, most uncertain times in history, where there was no clear Christ-centered leadership at all, one YouTube clip that you had in opposition to the mandates was inspirational to me, and I know so many other people. So I'm glad to repay the favor. And it's my story of how I became a chiropractor is pretty similar to I think a lot of people. I had a chiropractic experience, and I grew up in Snohomish, super poor, didn't have dinner, poor, and with three other brothers, and lived in a mobile home. And the summer before my junior year of high school, I was going to my friend's house, and he thought it'd be super fun to go 55 miles an hour down his driveway in the Blues and Control. I was the passenger, he was the driver, and we lost control, hit the embankment, and when we rolled, he didn't have his seatbelt on. So I just reached out to grab a hold of him. It's just kind of this automatic reflex. And then he wedged between me and the seat, which then pushed me out of the top part of my seatbelt. I went through the side window and then hit my face in the ground at 55 miles an hour. So,
oh man,
I remember the emergency vehicles came, and they were like, you need to go to the hospital. And, again, at the time, like we, my family doesn't have money for food. And I'm like, I'm alive right now. So I'm definitely not going to the hospital. And then my parents are going to kill me because they get a hospital bill. So I end up, not going to the hospital, go back home next day, can barely move, go to the medical doctors. And then began my legal drug addiction because medical doctors do what they do. They know medicine. And so I got put on pain pills, muscle relaxers, and as time went on, I mean, I developed worse pain, muscle spasms, headaches. I had a noticeable limp. Part of my face was paralyzed because of neurological damage. And the worst part about this whole experience is this constant thought every single night, laying in bed and just thinking, if this is the way the rest of my life is going to be, like, is that a life that's even worth living? And every night having that thought. And so, I lived this way for over a year until someone finally was like, why don't you go to a chiropractor? And at that point, I'm like, why would I? They're not real doctors. Why would I go? And so everyone knows that medical doctors don't like them, so therefore they're not good. And everyone knows that. But at this point, again, I'm considering suicide pretty much on a regular basis. And so I'm like, what's the loss, right? So I ended up going to chiropractor, and I remember that first chiropractic adjustment from Dr. Lane Stout. And I remember, my gosh, my world was so rocked. I was so endorphin hit. I mean, it took me probably 2.5 hours to drive home. It was like a 20-minute drive. I was so discombobulated. And that's coming from someone who is pretty much high all the time, right?
Oh.
And began the road of regaining my health. And it was a long road. It was.
How old were you at this time?
I was 15. Yeah.
So how old were you when the accident happened?
I was 14 when the accident happened.
Okay. So it's apparent that God had his hand on you. First of all, what did you hit at 55 miles an hour? You hit
my face into the ground. We hit the embankment, and then we hit one of those green PUD boxes, and it put it in the spin and then crashed.
You hit your head, right? You hit your head, your face. That's part of your head.
Into the ground. Yeah.
Into the ground at 55. Usually you don't walk away from that, right?
That's what the emergency vehicle people were saying too, the first responders.
That's just a miracle in itself.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like if, God, I think that's a testimony of God's grace. Like he had his hand on you. And so you get rocked by an adjustment. You're 15 years old. And so your eyes are open to this profession. He removed a rock in your shoe. You had no idea it was there, basically. And so tell us then, I want to know more about this addiction. So you were prescribed these pain meds. Was this like an endless supply of prescriptions? Like, hey, just take these?
So what it was because my parents again were poor. So I originally got this prescribed, pain pills, muscle relaxers, but then my parents didn't have money to keep refilling the prescription. So then I turned to illegal drugs, and really, like, the main thing that I kind of leaned on was just smoking just copious amounts of marijuana. And then pretty much it wasn't ever a thing where I was like, oh, I'm doing this to feel good. And again, it was just about maintaining a level of numbness just to make life bearable.
Right. So you were filling this void.
It really, if I could sum it up, it was literally just trying to numb the voice of that saying, like, if this is the way life is going to be, is that life even worth living? That if I could really say, like, justification, like, day after day, that's what it was. It was just numbing a voice that was just.
What was the catalyst then that filled that void that caused the trajectory of your life to change?
Well, what it came down to, I mean, when I got that first chiropractic adjustment, I remember that next day I felt worse. I felt like I was hit by a bus. And then the day after that, I was like, I'm moving a little better. And then I started to have hope, is what it comes down to. And the hope that this was not going to be the way the rest of my life was going to be. And then I diligently followed Dr. Stout's care plan and regained my health and my mobility, and eventually graduated high school and was working construction. And then, my wife is very much a strong woman of faith and conviction, and she doesn't pussyfoot around. So I remember one day I'm working construction, I'm making good money, I'm feeling really proud about myself. I do mixed martial arts at this time. I'm feeling like a stud. And she's like, so you're just gonna be a construction worker your whole life? That really is, like, that's what God calls you to do? And I was like, actually, what I wanted to do is I want to be a chiropractor, because I mean, my chiropractor literally changed the direction of my life. I was going down the road of drug addiction as a lifelong road, and she changed the direction. I wanted to do that, and that really was what I felt was called to do. But I was afraid, I was afraid because it's like, I grew up poor, right? And so I had a job, I was making good money, and it was, my wife was a person that's like, well, if you're called to do the thing that you're called to do, then you need to get a plan in place to do that.
Mm-hmm. So you married a good woman.
Yeah. Strong, good woman. Yes.
It's a very similar experience. I was working, my wife was basically, she's like, you got to do something. You can't just be working at a warehouse here. And, basically I think God was using her to say, well, listen, I got a bigger purpose for you. Right. And so you married this woman. She was cracking the whip on you, telling you got to do something. You got to be, God's got bigger things for you. So did those feelings go away? Like, hey, you got that adjustment. That was a catalyst. That was a life-changing adjustment. You started feeling better, started moving better, started feeling better about yourself. Were those thoughts still there?
About, like, what kind of thoughts? Could I have more to clarify a little bit more for me?
So yeah, you had these thoughts like, is life worth living? Right. So
yeah.
When did that change? Was it the adjustment?
Well, and so that's an interesting thing, because I end up with an auto injury there, especially auto injury with a minor. There's like this whole insurance claim process that occurs. So I ended up actually getting sent to like a neurologist as they're closing this insurance claim up. And so I go to this neurologist, and I did this whole day of neurological testing, and they were I mean, it's like all these like weird puzzles and like different worksheets, and it's like a full day of testing. In the end, they developed their assessment of me. So they did neurocognitive assessment for like memory. So my short-term memory was probably on a scale of 0 to 100. 100 was average, and then 0 was you're disabled, and above 100 is above average. My short-term memory was, I'm out of high school at this point, and my short-term memory was 25%. And so I could literally, if we met, start a conversation with you, by the end of the conversation, I wouldn't know who you were or what we talked about. And I got this reputation in construction of having like this really strong work ethic, because I would run everywhere. Someone said, go get a tool, I'd run. But really, I would just forget if I didn't get there soon enough. And so I developed this work ethic, right? But really, I'd like, and there is no other. I mean, you get a level of feeling terrible about yourself if you're in a construction crew and you forget the thing that you're supposed to get. They talk so much crap at you, and so short term was not good, really, really bad. Short to long term was okay, and then long term was average. But the thing that was interesting was my problem solving ability of my brain was like 200 and something percent. And what the neurologist explained was, because my brain was able to form a status of what's called neuroplasticity, or rapid changes, since my short-term memory didn't function how it was supposed to, my problem solving made up for it. And now what we know and understand with a lot of research that Dr. Heidi Havock's doing is that after every single chiropractic adjustment, that neuroplasticity occurs by 25 to 35%. So that in essence, that chiropractic care took my injury, my disability, and turned it into now what is my greatest strength. And so, but that doesn't really answer your question about the feelings of darkness and like, is life worth living? I was also diagnosed with severe generalized anxiety disorder, and then also severe medical depression. And I remember sitting down with this very well-intentioned medical doctor, and she's like, okay, here's your anxiety medication, here's your depression medication. And I'm looking at these medications, and my chiropractor has educated me on our body's ability to heal itself if you simply minimize your negative thoughts, your traumas, and your toxins, and your body can heal if it has proper brain to body communication. And so I'm looking at these medications knowing that this is a toxin, and I'm trying to understand how this is going to help my brain heal, because they're saying I have this severe depression and anxiety because of this damage, right? So I'm looking at these medications, and I'm like, I see all these side effects, and I'm concerned because there's a lot of side effects, but I don't really understand how these help me heal.
Mm-hmm.
And this medical doctor told me, she goes, medicine doesn't help you heal. It'll help you feel better. And I said, well, I've been feeling this way for years now. So I think it was like 7 years at that point. So I don't need to pretend feel better. I need to heal. And so I don't want to take something that's going to make me feel better if it then decreases my healing. And she hit me with a piece of wisdom that I would say could benefit any person that struggles with both depression and anxiety. She says, every time your brain is going to have to make changes, it is going to go through these highs and lows. Very similar to like a toddler that goes from a sitting position to a standing position. Right when they right before they make a jump, they get super fussy, right? Mm-hmm. Or when they start to roll over, like right before they make that jump, because that brain is making big changes and it has to process that change. So she said, every time that's going to occur, you're going to feel this for the rest of your life. And so just understand what happens in a lot of people's minds is they say, oh, I feel bad because my job. And now you've created a link, kind of like Pavlov's dog experiment, ring the bell, show him food. And she said, you just need to understand that when you feel this way, that is simply your brain about to make a developmental jump. And I believe it, and I understand with neurology, that's true for everybody. It's just a little bit more tense on my part. So do I still process those same highs and lows? Absolutely. But really what I now know, and looking backwards, is that every hard thing that I've gone through ends up then serving other people. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, this is really hard, but now I know there's going to be like significant fruit coming out of it.
Right. So, I mean, this is the power of chiropractic. I mean, just the power of the adjustment. And really, again, I mean, I believe that our role as a chiropractor is the restoration and maintenance of the integrity of the nervous system. And so, I mean, you're living proof of that, and just the power. I mean, that God made the body; He can heal the body, and when we remove that obstruction to healing, healing occurs. And so, I think it's very powerful. What a powerful story. So now, your wife's like, "Okay, let's go, Devin. You're out of it. You're not going to be a construction worker. I'm not marrying this construction worker. And if you're a construction worker, there's nothing wrong with that. God has you there. But if God has a bigger purpose for you, then you need to listen to that voice. And if you got to go pursue His will." Okay. Now, Devin, you felt like, okay, we got this calling for chiropractic school. Walk me through that. When did you feel this calling to be a chiropractor?
I mean, really, it's it kind of gradually built as I gradually regained my health. I in my family, like currently, like there is a large amount of drug addiction. My mom was basically died of bladder cancer with legal drug addiction that she's had been on prescribed medications for the majority of her life, and very unhealthy. And it really is like a heartbreaking thing to see people like just have their health decline. So as the years go on, and as I gained my strength to the point where I am able to do physically whatever I want, where I was not able to do whatever I wanted, and knowing that potential is there, it made me realize that there's this hurt that is in our world that needs healing. And so if I have people that I care about, I want them to experience ultimate life, and telling them, hey, you should go to a chiropractor. They're like, we give each other advice all day long. We all ignore it, right? But if I know how to heal by hand, then I know I can help those people. And so it just continued to grow, mainly because there is no other solution in my mind. If there's a disconnect between the brain and the body, very similar to a blown circuit breaker, the circuit breaker has to get reset. I mean, that you can hope that the room will light up, but if it's been overloaded and disconnected, it just needs to get reconnected.
Amen.
And so, and that just, and more I learned, it's just more stacked on top of that. I could see, all the things that we talk about in the modern day, like of nutrition, decreasing toxins and everything. All of that is really ultimately true. But again, if that circuit breaker has been blown by an excessive activation of artificial environment, inactivity, and toxicity, you can clean it up, but you have to also reset the circuit breaker. I mean, and what I've noticed too is that when people are in that disconnected status, they'll tend to go back to those negative thoughts or that toxicity, because it's a coping mechanism very similar to what I was stuck in.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, think about what would the world be like if everyone was under chiropractic care. It'd be a different world. It'd be a different place.
Different world.
And if chiropractic was at the forefront of all healthcare, and if people sought out chiropractic first and foremost, but above anything else, I think it'd be a different place. It's interesting. I did a interview here with the show coming out. It was what was that, Tuesday? So today's Thursday. So 2 days ago, and the story is going to be out, and it's quite comical because they're going to try to shine a light on a lady that died, and they claim it was from the chiropractic visit, but she fell. I believe it was, there were so many variables here, and it was this lady that fell, had an injury, and then went to the chiropractor, and then she died. And it's like, okay, well, they're trying to shine a light on this story, and they can literally only find like 2 names or maybe 3 names at the most that there was an injury after the chiropractic adjustment. And I'm like, think about that. You can only find 3 names. And I'm like, chiropractic's been around for 100 and almost 30 years. I think this year, right? 130 years?
Close, pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, we've been around for, we're 2nd century chiropractors, and we still have the lowest malpractice claims out of any healthcare professional in the world. And you look at the drugs, I mean, NSAIDs kill 16,000 people every year. We have surgeries that kill millions of people every year. Medical errors are the 3rd leading cause of death in this country. And so, arguably, chiropractic is the safest form of healthcare. And so it should be the first and foremost, least invasive first. By their definition, we should be the first and foremost form of healthcare than any other profession. My dad had a sign in his clinic that said chiropractic first, then maybe drugs second, and surgery last. And that should be the protocol for healthcare. But again, it's so much more than just pain. It's all about function and restoration and maintenance, and so of the nervous system. Now, we've been in practice. It's crazy to think 13 years since we graduated. We're getting to that stage. You look the same as the day you graduated. I know my beard ages me. I have some gray in my beard. If I shaved, I look like I'd, the same. Yeah, sure. But, but giving the middle finger to the government, it's been stressful.
It's been a little tricky.
So, I know the stresses of that as well. I know you gave your middle finger to the government too. And so that's why we're having this conversation. And that's how I think, we are kind of kindled spirits here, because we both stood in the gap. We have convictions for what we believe that are greater than our fear of persecution and fear of our government and fear of complacency. And so, we have stood in the gap, especially, you in the state of Washington. So walk us through that. I know COVID hit. And when did you realize that this was all, I call it the corona baloney. When did you realize that this was, not what they were claiming?
Well, I want to clarify. It took me a bit to get to give them the middle finger part. At first, I wanted to give them nice kisses on the cheek, right? Because I really truly believe that, like, people are trying their best, right? And they're limited with the information and the understanding that they have. So when it was kind of flashback, 2020. It was February, almost, it was probably a couple weeks ago, February 2020. A group of our friends went down to an all-inclusive resort in Mexico, and we all stayed down there. And that's where this idea hatched of like, wouldn't it be cool if we had like an international facility where we could heal, but then also make a difference in a developing nation to do more good. And where a lot of these resorts are just coming in and they're just making money and they're sucking out of the community, like do the opposite. And so we had this group of friends, and then we ended up getting back home, and a good amount of us I remember on the flight home, I was like sitting there and like my heart palpitation, and I'm like, I need to think about like maybe not drinking so much when I go on these all-inclusive resorts because I feel like I'm dying. And then all of us got super sick. We got back, and one of our friends lost her taste and smell for like 3 months. And so then my brother-in-law, we get back. My brother-in-law is very much left-leaning politically. So I don't typically watch the news. I got too much stuff to do. My brother-in-law, he does like to watch the news. And I remember him saying to me, like, we got back, and he's like, what, you guys got that coronavirus? And I thought he was talking about beer. I thought he was talking about Corona, the beer. Oh, and I was like, I think so. I had no idea. I had no idea this global pandemic was raging across the world. I had and I kept it that way. I still didn't watch the news. And in fact,
like Amish.
Well, I was like, I didn't have anything. There was nothing I had control in. I've been a president of multiple nonprofit organizations. I monitor my time very closely. So I have my time with my family, I have my time in my clinic, I have my time in nonprofits, and I don't have time to sit and hear about things I have no control over. I have plenty that I have control over. And so my patients start coming in, they're concerned. And the general consensus was like, here's a virus that doesn't even give healthy people symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought at that moment, and maybe this thought is still true, in that moment, I was like, this is a gift from God, a virus that doesn't even affect healthy people. This is going to inspire all people to be healthier.
Yes, that's exactly right.
My God, it's such a blessing. And then I was expecting the world to go a certain way. And in fact, I was the president of a runners club, and we put on fundraisers. We've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for nonprofits. So we had a St. Patty's Day run. So Seattle shut down its St. Patty's Day run before COVID was even here, right? And I was like, oh, we're going to blow this thing up. We are going to put on an epic St. Patty's Day run. It's going to be huge. I mean, everyone from Seattle is going to come up to here to Arlington. And so I like put all these Facebook advertisements of like, we have a beer garden, but we're not gonna have with the bucket of Corona beers with the X through it. We're not gonna have that. We're gonna do our part. And people didn't think it was that funny when I made those jokes. So for me, I simply, if someone said, like, would you believe if underwear stopped a fart from spreading?
Mm-hmm.
I would be like, that's silly. We all can understand that. And that was like my idea of like this global construct that was taking form of like, here's the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was the level of idiocy that it was. And then it got a little more serious, right? I had about 100% of my Democratic voting patients drop off of care.
Mm.
And then I remember the night where they were like going to mandate the masking. And up to this point, I was still, again, living in a good status of ignorance of like, this is a joke, right? Because I wasn't watching the news. And after the fact, I've watched the news. I can see how compelling it was for people that did watch the news, and how really terrifying the propaganda was and the information that was being put out. But my wife and I, we had this conversation, again, just similar to when I got redirected to go to chiropractic college. We had this conversation of like, are we going to be followers of Christ?
Amen.
Or are we not? I mean, are we going to be the people like, yeah, we go to church because it teaches us good belief systems and everything, or do we call like Jesus our Lord? Like the Lord is to do as He did, right? Not this like pretend relationship. Like Lord is like, you're mine and you're my servant. And it became very like clear to us and everyone. It says the Holy Spirit convicts each person individually. So this was for me, and I wouldn't want anyone to feel any shame for a different decision, but this was for me and for Chelsea. And so the idea is that Jesus went and He healed by hand. Okay, well, I know how to do that. I learned how to do that. I'm pretty proficient at this point. And then he showed no fear in the side of illness and also oppression. So at that point, I'm like, well, the mask is pretty much in my mind a blatant sign of either fear from a virus or fear from people that think you should do it or fear from the government's reprisal, right? And so I mean, but I'm also not a person that is quick to give the middle finger, right? I really believed that I wanted to do the right thing and I wanted to follow the rules. So I remember the night before it was mandated, I just like was looking at constitutional law and I'm like, where are my rights as a United States citizen also? And it became pretty obvious to me. I was guided to the fact that we have inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And life is a measurement of health. On one side, you are fully alive, and on the other side, you're dead. And as a doctor, we are trained to monitor and manage that. And so, and within our license standard, we're also trained to monitor and manage that. So, for me, I came to a pretty conclusive decision that if something is negatively going to impact somebody's life, then as a doctor, I have the right to say this is not good for you. So therefore you don't have to do it because you're a United States citizen.
Right.
So we figured out minimizing interaction time to be less than 15 minutes, didn't transmit COVID. We interacted with hundreds of people a day and proved this to be true. So that's kind of where we went, kind of started the process.
So let's stop here for a second. I just want to be clear. Chiropractors were deemed essential, right? It's so funny, like the non-essential, essential. How comical that they literally could decide who's essential and not essential.
Yeah.
I mean, you're providing for your family for crying out loud, but you're not essential. Sorry. I mean, what a slap in the face of these people, right?
It's heartbreaking.
Right.
But be told you're not worth.
But you're not worth, right? And so, do. And going back to the propaganda, there's so much to unpack what we just talked about and what you mentioned here, the fear-mongering campaigns, the psychological warfare, the psychological impacts of the television constantly having a death count in front of the people. I mean, I took my wife to dinner and I was just like going around looking at the signs here and, going back in this place of like frustration and, of like, this is not biblical. This is not, I shouldn't say biblical is not the right word.
It's biblical, right?
Well, it is biblical, right? But it's evil. This is evil.
It's not in line with Jesus' teaching of how we're responding.
Right. Yes. And this is evil being spewed on the people. And so I shouldn't say give a middle finger. That's probably not the right word, but we took a stand because we were exposing it. We're exposing this corruption. We could see through this. God has given us the eyes to see, right? We've inclined our ear to his knowledge and his wisdom. Right. And so we have that knowledge, and now we have we're applying our heart to take action here, right? And so when we see this corruption, we see this problem, and guys like you and me are saying, no, enough's enough here. I mean, there's so many flaws to this narrative. There's so many flaws to this story. We're putting our hands on people. We're not wearing masks. I mean, because we had parallels in our office. We didn't wear a mask. We saw hundreds of people a week. We came in close proximity. I'm not putting stupid stickers on my door or on my floor. I'm not putting arrows on my floor. I'm like, forget that. I'm blasting Christian music. I'm putting my hands on people. Yeah. And I would always pose the question, how many people? I mean, you had an identical office to myself. Yes, I lost all my Democratic people, but in the mask wears my office. But my office exploded because we were a place of hope, and hope is the most powerful drug there is. And so I'd always pose a question. I mean, how many other offices were like ours, Devin? So that posed the question, and we didn't get sick during that time. I never got sick during that. And it's like, how many people do we have to see? How many violations do we have to be in order for this contagion claim to be mathematically impossible?
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Correct. Yes. And the thing is, I came to a conclusion is that it came down to a simple belief system. And this may be a little bit too generalized, but it seems to be how I've come to peace with this situation, because I was right with you. I mean, we literally would measure people's oxygen levels, go from subclinical, sick, dying with COVID, and we'd put them in a room and we would provide chiropractic care, and we'd measure their oxygen levels increasing and then stabilizing. We didn't have a single patient die, a single patient go to the hospital, be hospitalized, or a single patient develop chronic COVID. And so even after all of that, and I love your passion, because I resonate so deeply with it, because it's like, how much more obvious can this possibly be? And what I believe it comes down to is like really medicine has elevated itself to the status of an undocumented church. And so therefore it isn't about what is obvious or not. It's about what the belief system is. In my mind, there are followers now of medicine and there's followers of Christ. And then there's a lot of people in the gray zone that are torn back and forth of like, they hear God's whisper, but they put a lot of faith in medicine. And now I think a lot of those people are now moving towards Christ. But that's what it comes down to, because after 4 years, I've been under investigation for 4 years by the government. For the first investigation, I was investigated and they said, we see that you're not in compliance with the mask mandates. And I said, actually, I'm fully compliant, because the mandates say that everyone's required to wear a mask unless they would have a negative health consequence. And I inform every single one of my patients that they have a negative health consequence. And so ipso facto, every single person is exempt if they have a negative health consequence, which they do, because there are 3 things that directly cause a electrical demand on our system, which causes overload within our electrical system, which is anything synthetic. Right now, it's kind of a funny thing because right now there's a lot of studies showing like walking barefoot outside is good for you. Being in nature is good for you. It's not that being in nature is good for you. That's actually how we're supposed to live. It's the synthetic artificial environment is bad for you. It's just kind of comical though, right? Because anything synthetic is having an electrical demand in our system because our nervous system has to perceive and adapt to it.
Yes.
And then the second thing is anything that creates immobility or fixation. So having a mass that's fixating the jaw position in the neck is also creating fixation within that nervous system, creating an electrical demand. And it was so interesting to study the neurology behind that, because if you've ever seen somebody pull their mask down to listen, it shines a lot of light on what it directly is getting affected, because there is this nerve called the vagus nerve that is the biggest indicator if someone's going to die from COVID based on HRV, biggest indicator someone's going to die from cancer, and biggest indicator someone's going to develop chronic inflammatory condition is vagus nerve function via HRV.
Heart rate variability, for those that are wondering, HRV, heart rate variability.
Yes, heart rate variability. So this vagus nerve controls 2 muscles, one in our throat and then one in our ear. So when we get nervous and we get a frog in our throat, that's because the vagus nerve is shutting down. When you go to fire a gun in a shooting range, it's very loud, right? But if you're going to go shoot an animal, you ever notice how you barely hear the fire, even though you don't have earmuffs on? Because when you have that sympathetic, that fight or flight response, the vagus nerve downregulates, dampens down the hearing. So when you have artificial stimulation of the face, it downregulates the facial nerve and then downregulates the vagus nerve. So every moment someone was wearing a mask, in essence, they were directly impacting their heart rate variability negatively, directly increasing the risk of disease of all types across the board. So when they remove the mask, it would stimulate the vagus nerve so they could hear better. And that's one of the things. This is all measurable. And so we measure all this, we send it back into the Department of Health, and they're like, and we're told them our measures we put in place so we didn't have any transmission of COVID. And when someone receives a chiropractic adjustment, activates the prefrontal cortex, which is the other part of the heart rate variability, which again is the biggest predictor if someone's actually going to get COVID. So if someone's receiving chiropractic care, in essence, you're keeping that neurological defense system activated. So of course there wasn't any spread. They're optimal health when they're here. And so they congratulated me. They said, "Hey, thank you, Dr. Brossard. You were kind. You were compliant. You are the gold standard for COVID safety protocols." Again, all non-masked. And they asked me if I would ever consider interviewing to be on the Department of Health, which, again, I've always just wanted to help. They just have bad information. So I interviewed to be on the Department of Health. I'm chosen as the #1 recommendation for the Department of Health. And they email me, they say, "Congratulations, you got it. But it's not official. The governor has to appoint you." And, I can't confirm what happens next. They told me that the governor always appoints who they recommend. But the very next month, the governor was simply going to do his due diligence on me and do a background check on me. The very next month, we had open investigations again on all doctors, accusing all the doctors within my office of moral turpitude, which was the equivalent of raping a patient, and including myself.
Oh.
So, I mean, the timing, I can't assume that the governor's office is.
But you have these emails. You have these emails to prove. right?
I
Please tell
have
me you
it
have these.
for the Department of Health asking me
Yes.
to interview for them.
Yeah. And then, offering a position.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I absolutely do. And then, and I have the timelines because then I have this open investigation again, and I don't blame my doctors that worked for me because, and you and I know, and we know what it feels like to be threatened. We know what it feels like to be called names. We know that at the point where when a government can convince someone to put a piece of fabric on their face in the same scientific rationale as stopping a fart, we know how much power these people have, and it's very scary. And so I do not blame my doctors, but they definitely did not handle the stress of the investigation, and they all one of them called the Department of Health and said, hey, Dr. Brossard's bad. I never wanted to wear, I always wanted to wear a mask. I just chose not to, which then, I was in a tough situation where I had to defend him because that's against the law, like against the law to just say, I just am choosing not to because I don't want to. It isn't against the law to say I'm choosing not to because this is negatively impacting my health. There's a big difference. And so then I had to defend him in order to save his license because that was punitive by the law's standard. And so I go through this whole investigation process. And at the end of it, 4 years later, to date, again, perfect stats for health. One would say a gold standard in healthcare within our clinic. I am now formally charged by the Department of Health for immorality and unprofessionalism. So in a profession that manages and treats the vertebral subluxation complex with 100% survival health maintenance, I was charged with unprofessionalism. And I realized with the immorality statement, this idea that medicine has become its own church because they are basing their judgment on what's immoral based on similar to extreme religions that force people to cover their face because it's within their belief systems. Because really that's their charges. Their charges is you did not cover your face, therefore you are immoral. And in my mind, that is in the same realm as a religious doctrine.
100%.
But for me, I'm a follower of Christ. So I did what Christ demonstrated, and that's how I made the decisions up to the point where I am now. And through this whole process, I ended up, having to. I think something similar happened with yourself, where you had to take a little break from practice because you needed some time to heal and recover. Is that correct?
Well, we have to understand what this is. Just zoom out from a 30,000 sky foot view. First of all, God calls us to this profession. This is a calling. It's not a career. Calls you for a certain purpose, like Esther 4:14. You were made for such a time as this, right? We were in this profession. We want to provide a living. That's great. Putting our hands on people. But then the calling came, right? It's kind of like the way I view this is David and Goliath. You got a giant champion of war taunting the Israelites. Nothing against the doctors in your office. God bless them. They're there to serve. They're there to do their mission. Not everybody's a David. Those soldiers, the Israelites on the side of the hill, they would be glad to fight, but not the giant.
Not David, not Goliath.
Not Goliath, right?
Right.
And they see this giant. They're terrified. They're fearful. And God calls us to be like David, to have the courage to slay the giant. And what made David, courageous? What made him righteous? It was his faith, his convictions. And my friend, that's what I see in you. That's what we have in this fight. What would it look like if we had, I think it was John Wesley who stated, if I had 300 men who feared nothing but God, hated nothing but sin, and were determined to know nothing but Jesus Christ and him crucified, that set the world on fire. And we're not here to fear earthly masters nor to bend a knee. And we're here to change the world and to live for Christ and pick up our cross, to live courageously and not conform, like it says in Romans 12:2. Do not conform to this world. And conformity means that we're doing what everybody else is doing, regardless of what our convictions are. And we, my friend, are called for a higher purpose, to change the world, to live out those convictions. And so to go back to what you mentioned, like me taking a break from practice, this is a war. We were in a war, spiritual war. We still are. This isn't going away. The intensity has gone, but just like in battle, they battle, then they might retreat for a while, then they go back to battle. And this is the heat of the moment. COVID was in battle. We were going to battle. So now we need spiritual rest. We need that physical rest, and to regroup and refocus, because I do think that there is going to be another wave, whether it's the bird flu, whatever it may be. And again, we cannot forget history, because it was really the Christians during the Spanish flu that were unafraid back in the day. And if we forget history, Spanish flu, and I know you know this, Devin, but there is the social distancing. They weaponized the common cold. They had businesses deemed essential, non-essential during Spanish flu. They had, virtue signaling with the mask. You weren't allowed to enter in businesses without a mask on, or in public spaces. They had people that had signs literally say, wear a mask or go to jail. And they had articles that was published by BJ that talked about a few fearful physicians force funny flu frivolates for a few frenzied folks. And BJ even talked about, does the mask keep out the mosquitoes? And I love the saying, does your underwear stop a fart? It's like, it's true, because it's comical at this point. And so really, this is Spanish flu 2.0. They took the same plays from the Spanish flu and they implemented it during Crony Baloney. And, BJ said, listen, there's nothing to be fearful here. There's nothing to be afraid of. Just come under my care, chiropractic care, and you'll do wonders. People that were under chiropractic care and lived a healthy lifestyle, they had better outcomes. In fact, nobody died except for maybe one person. And I think there was comorbidities associated with that. Literally one.
Yeah. And they did massive studies across the whole state, across the country. And that's where,
yes.
I'm right with you. But for me, it's I look at our profession and I'm like, I see you and I see myself. I don't see any studies. I did studies. You took care of people, but it's almost as if the profession itself has almost kind of stepped underneath that medical umbrella.
They're afraid. And they're the Israelites.
Yeah.
That's the problem. They're the Israelites sitting on the hill, unafraid, not knowing who they serve. They're confused. They're like, they see this Goliath and they just cower.
Right.
And it's a problem. And so we need to take the reins and really lead this profession to the forefront. And I think that there is massive opportunity here for that. Not from a financial standpoint. It's not what I'm after. I'm here to change the world for the better, to get people in chiropractic care to know Christ first and foremost, have a relationship with him, and to get them to heaven. And second of all, for them to be healthy. I mean, our body's a temple. And to get them under chiropractic care, it would change the world for the better, and it would help really and push that chiropractic philosophy to the masses. It would revolutionize healthcare for the better. So tell me, obviously now we're in these legal battles with you, and we are in, the government's coming after you, and now you are in a battle. Goliath is saying, "Hey, Devin, you are actually in violation now, and we're going to fine you." So give me the latest on this, because obviously this isn't a cheap thing. You have to get attorneys. You have to fight now for your livelihood and for your practice and your reputation. So tell me about this.
Well, it's been I've had attorneys this whole time, so it's been this kind of legal battle for the last 4 years, and you hit on something so profound, that it's the opportunity is here. And I find myself kind of conflicted, because again, I kind of feel like, there's been very specific moments in my life where Jesus was like, okay, are you going to be like me? And one of those was deciding to be a chiropractor. You're going to heal with your hands. Like you were healed. Now you go heal. And then there was another opportunity where it was scary. And it's like, okay, where are you going to demonstrate what I demonstrated, Jesus' example? And so then again, that was scary. And now I find myself in a pivotal moment, because I I unplugged. The reason why I went to the Dominican Republic, and it is such an incredible healing place, because I was at a point where the stress of all the investigations that got to my breaking point, and I was just like, my blood pressure was so high, my blood vessels, my eyes were rupturing, I was slowly going blind. And then I went to the DR, and then I went and looked at property, and I stepped foot on that property. That moment of stepping out of the door, the moment I'm talking about. We get out of your car at the top, and all you can hear is the waterfall and the birds. It was like the first time I could like take a breath. And I realized at that moment is that like I just have been disconnected from God's like healing presence, right? And that place is like the Garden of Eden, where you cannot help but feel God's healing presence. And in fact, when we bought it, it was built by missionaries, and we bought it. And I said, I don't know how we're going to do it, but I believe that this property is going to allow me to study healing in order to understand and then teach others that the power that Jesus demonstrated in the Bible to heal is just as real now as it was back then. And so when we were coming back here and coming back to the practice, and I've been very conflicted because right now, every single person knows how to be a medical doctor. Everyone does. Everyone knows if you have pain, you take pain pills. Everyone knows if you have inflammation, you take anti-inflammatory drugs. Everyone knows if you have an upset stomach, and you take an antacid. Everyone knows if you have an infection, you get antibiotics. Everyone knows how to be a medical doctor. And in fact, to the point where medical doctors, their biggest complaint is that they don't actually treat anymore. People come to tell them what they want, and they give them what they want, or else they get a new doctor. And what we see now, look around, we see chronic illness, we see death, we see destruction, we see a decreased life expectancy with the United States. And for me, what I see is moms aware of this, and moms fighting for their children. And I realized that if everyone knows how to be a medical doctor, why can't everyone know how to heal by hand? And really, and to graduate chiropractic college, we have to perform 250 adjustments, right? In order to be competent in adjusting. And then there are chiropractic colleges in Europe that they don't even have to perform a chiropractic adjustment. And so what we have done now is we have started up a nonprofit international organization, a church that's dedicated to the mission of Christ. And we've called it Symmetry Chiropractic Mission Centers. And it was kind of an interesting thing, because the constitutional lawyer that helped set this organization up, she's like, you're going to get in trouble for using the word chiropractic. And I'm like, well, I know how to heal by hands, but I don't know how to do the whole Jesus did the mud and the eye thing. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do the whole like touch my cloak and you're healed. I don't know how to do the whole like, yeah, you're good, but I know how to do this. And so it was one day we're at the property, and there's that tile on the side of the wall, and it has this weird symbol on it. And one of my friends, Dr. Bench, was visiting us, and he's like, you know what this symbol is? And he's like, I've seen this all over in Rome. And I'm like, no, what is it? And we look it up, and what it is the very first symbol of Christ. It's an X, what looks like a P. And so what it is it's two letters in the Greek alphabet. The first one is spelled C-H-I, Chi is how it's pronounced. And the second one is spelled R-H-O, Rho. So the very first symbol of Christ was the Chi-Rho. So what would you call people that practiced what Christ practiced? We call them chiropractors. And it's not, I don't know if it's coincidental that D.D. Palmer was told by Reverend Samuel Reed to call the profession chiropractors. But I think this chiropractic profession has moved away from following Christ, and they moved towards following medicine based on the fact that we were alone. And so for me and our mission moving forward is this new church, this new organization. What we're committed to is not, the world doesn't need more doctors. Like, we went to school to learn how to be medical doctors and then how to adjust. I mean, that's really it. Like, the chiropractic schooling used to be a very short curriculum until they decided that we need to be real doctors, right? And so really the mission moving forward is to empower people with the ability to heal by hands, because if every single person knows how to get drugs, prescribe drugs, tell the doctors what kind of drugs, and every single family should have someone that can heal by hand within that family unit. And to me, when I look at my own life, and again, I'm definitely going to get some kickback on this one, but when I look at the example that Christ said, he said, make disciples, teach people to do what I'm teaching, not have them go to school for 8 years in order to then get a degree that's managed by medical doctors, but teach them to do what I do.
That's good. It's powerful stuff, man. I love that. I mean, I know you sent me that, the picture of the two letters, and we had that conversation. So it's, I think that's absolutely fascinating. But man, what a powerful story, Devin. I know we could talk for hours on end. I know we can, it's been almost 60 minutes here, and I usually try to keep it about 60 minutes. I want to give you the last word here, just a word of encouragement for those that are listening. And maybe we can do a part 2 of this, because I feel like we can just dive into so much more and so many more topics, and we can talk for hours on end. But really, I think, I love that our conversation, the direction it took. And I just want to give the last word to you for a word of encouragement for those that are listening, those that are struggling, those that are maybe in a situation that have anxiety, that they are in a place where is life worth living? What would you say to those people?
Well, first of all, it's not your fault. That would be my first thing, because if you break down the acronym of sin, you can understand what shuts down the healing part of our nervous system. The prefrontal cortex, also known as the God center of our brain, our healing part of our brain, and our vagus nerve. And it comes down to synthetic, for S, anything artificial is shutting down that part of the brain and the nervous system. And I believe that's how God flows through us. And because that part of our neuroanatomy is very specific to us. Number 2 is immobility or inactivity. Shuts it down also. Kids within 15 to 20 minutes can't pay attention in class if they're sitting. Sitting increases the risk of death by all types and disease by hours of sitting. And sitting on our phone also diminishes our ability to feel joy, feel that presence, that healing energy that God pumps through us. And then negativity. And we like to blame other people for the negativity, but really Harvard did a study that looked at average thoughts. We have between 6,000, 60,000 thoughts every single day. For the 60,000 people, that's like more than 1 thought per second for waking hours. And out of that study, 75% of us have the negative thoughts. 75% of the thoughts are negative, and 90% of them are repeating. If you find yourself in this place, it's not your fault, because look around. The environment that you're put in, you were told was good for you. You were told from birth it was good for you. You were lied to. And so my encouragement would be, the reason why you feel this way is because this is how you feel, because this is the status that your body is. It's disconnected. And if you simply go in to someone who knows how to remove nerve interference, reset those circuit breakers within the nervous system, it'll start to turn on that God center of the brain. But most importantly, and this is where I think the public should be in absolute outrage, is that during the pandemic, think about what happened with our synthetic life, how much more synthetic it got, how much more immobile it got, and how much more negative it got. And not one single United States citizen was asked to sign an informed consent form. And in the world of our law, you got prescribed something that made you sicker, that disconnected you from God's energy, and you were never told the risks. And it's not your fault. Your brain is trying to tell you it's your fault because it's always looking for something to blame, and it often blames ourselves. It's not yours.
It's not your fault.
It's not your fault.
Well said, Devin. Well said. Where can people find you? Symmetry Oasis, Dominican. Big things in the head.
Yep. Best website is litup.global, because our mission now is to light up the world one well-adjusted family at a time.
Awesome, my friend. Devin, thanks for your time. Ton of respect for you. God bless you, my friend. Such a powerful testimonial. Keep pushing forward. Keep fighting the fight. Don't give your middle finger to the government, but take a stand against corruption and tyranny, right? I think Thomas Jefferson said, when tyranny becomes law, resistance becomes duty. And that is our job as patriots. Being patriotic doesn't mean you love the government, but it means you love the people and love the land here. And that's what being a patriot is all about. But also, first and foremost, being a Christian is standing for injustice. And that's what we're here to do. God bless you, Devin. Thanks for your time, brother. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate you.
To August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be wearing gloves, a face shield, and mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring your cell phone over.
600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?